Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, has been gone for a really long time. Would he be proud of the company he made today? Let's begin. Now I hate to bring this up because I think a lot of people bring it up, is that, oh, if Steve Jobs were here, this would have never happened. Now people refer to this phrase whenever Apple screws up on something. They make something stupid or they make a dumb decision. They always want to go back to Steve Jobs and say, oh, if Steve Jobs were around, he wouldn't do this or he wouldn't have let this happen. There is no way to know hardcore for a fact that Steve Jobs would have preferred it this way or the other way. So I just want to say from the get-go, this is all hypothetical. None of this is for sure. But we're just going to be using that point of view in today's mindset. So starting off, the screen sizes. So from 2011, when Steve Jobs had passed away because of pancreatic cancer, the year right after Steve Jobs had passed, Apple made the iPhone 5's display bigger than the iPhone 4S. And no, this is just not a way to move on. It's because Steve Jobs was very set on that 3.5 in form factor, and he always said, this is a light and portable device, we don't need to make it any bigger. And as we've seen, Apple slowly, from when he passed away, has been slowly moving towards bigger, thicker, and phones with more features. 2 years after Steve Jobs had passed away, they made the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, which had huge displays compared to when Steve Jobs was around. So yeah, I think Steve Jobs would have not been okay with that. I know it's crazy to be going on with the 3.5 form factor here in 2019, but I think Steve Jobs would have been very ignorant against, sticking with that 3.5 form factor, and he really want to stick to it until, someone came around like Tim Cook. So yeah, I think he might have not been okay with that, but I'd like to hear what you guys think about that. I personally think he wouldn't be okay with making the phones a little bit bigger. Okay, so second off, the very famous phrase, who wants stylus? Now I know there are many jokes on the internet about how Apple released this in the original iPhone's keynote. Steve Jobs came out and said,
oh, who needs a stylus?
And then 8 years after that, Apple released the iPad Pro with the stylus. And yes, people started making these timelines about, 2007, Apple said this. And then 2015, Apple said this. Oh, boom, roasted. Now you gotta understand, okay, the iPad and the iPhone are very different products, okay? And Steve was very ignorant about adding a stylus to the iPhone. That is because it is a smaller display. It is a tiny display and it doesn't make sense to go ahead and use a stylus with such a small display like that. And that is why Steve Jobs had ignored and didn't want to implement a stylus into the first iPhone. And also, technology had to move on, right? We couldn't just stick to styluses. But the iPad Pro is a very different product, okay? The stylus is actually a pro-creative tool that is used with the iPad to get results that are simply not possible with just using your fingers. So yeah, I don't understand why people want to make fun of this whole thing because these are completely two different products. Now that argument would be justified if Apple put a stylus on the iPhones. Personally, I think that's dumb, they shouldn't do that. But yeah, these are very different products and I don't think you should be comparing those two. Now, one thing that many people say is a downfall in Apple's history is removing stuff from the phone. And this, I think Steve would have been very okay with removing the headphone jack. See, Steve was all about making products as thin and light as possible. When the first iPod was in its early stages, the engineering team made as thin as an iPod they could, and Steve looked at it and said, nope, that's not thin enough. He basically dropped it into a fish bowl and said, look, there's bubbles coming out, we need to make this smaller. Obviously a very rude way of telling that to the design team, but yeah, Steve was all about making all the products much thinner and lighter. In your pocket, wherever you're using it. He was a huge fan of the MacBook Air, so was he of the iPod Touch, which made it really thin. He was all about making MacBooks, iPads, and even iPhones as thin as possible. So yeah, I think he would have been okay with removing the headphone jack so that we can make more room for other stuff in the phone, like a better Taptic engine, like a better battery. Yeah, I think he would have been very okay with doing that. And also, I think he would have been amazed to see what Bluetooth technology really could do. Like nowadays, AirPods, he would have been really amazed with those. Now, another thing that people bring up a lot is the notch, okay? Now again, the notch is an irregularity, okay? There's no denying the fact that it's irregular, it's not exactly symmetrical. But again, I think Steve Jobs would have been okay with the notches because, again, he was all about getting the most out of the smallest, the thinnest device as possible. So yeah, I think he would have probably looked at the iPhone 10 and be like, oh, that's the best we can do. then okay. It's not like when he suddenly saw the notch, he was suddenly roared back in his grave. I think he would have been very okay with the notch. And other things that people like to bring up, like the Apple Pencil one's charging method, yeah, I think that's stupid too, okay? Apple needs to change that. But they did change it with the iPad Pros this year, but again, it's the same for the cheaper iPads. And yeah, I think Steve, I don't know what exactly he would have thought of that, but yeah, you get it, right? This looks stupid. I don't think Steve would have been okay with doing this either. And yeah, overall, all this stuff aside, Tim Cook has been an amazing CEO. He has got so many things to the market, and like the iPod Touch, which Steve would have really wanted to see, because if you ever held one of those things are incredibly tiny. We still sell those. I recommend you to go to a store or something and just feel the iPod Touch and how light and thin it is. Yeah, I think Steve would have been amazed with products like the iPod Touch or the AirPods, which he really loved, or at least the concept they were making at the time. He really was a big fan of making things thin and light. And yeah, I think he'll be pretty proud of the company he made today. Anyways guys, I'd like to know what all you think about this whole fiasco and how Steve Jobs would have liked the new Apple or the old Apple, or how when he was around. All that good stuff, let me know in the comments down below. Now that this is Apple and I will see you on the next one.